Welcome to Spider-Verse Minute, the tri-weekly podcast where we watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 1 minute at a time. I'm Caroline Slater.
And I'm her brother Sean.
And today we are discussing Minute 72. It begins with Tombstone entering the room, and ends a minute later with Prowler crashing in.
Prowler dropping by.
See, I thought of that, but he kind of more like jumps through the window, so I'm like, dropping by doesn't really work.
Yeah. What did you end up titling this minute?
Fight with Spider Gang.
Yep, the Spider
Gang.
Joins the battle. I do. It is kind of funny that was what he came up with. Like, I guess there really isn't a much better off the spot name you could do with Spider Gang.
No.
But yeah, that was a funny little well, you're gonna have to deal with us. We have a cool name.
The first thing I have down, besides the amazing name choosing, is I love how, first off, the reveal of Scorpion.
Yeah.
Which is such a cool design.
Yeah, I really like his design in this.
Yeah. I like how he comes in and he speaks Spanish, and this is like the first and only time they translate the Spanish.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting having him get translated here. Like, it's a little odd because none of the other Spanish is translated at all.
But I feel like they did it because with every other Spanish, it's more of like Miles' world. Like it's just how he is, conversational, nothing. It's building his world, it's building the world, it's building who he is as a person. Here, it's much more purposeful.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's building a character there, but it's also like giving a threat. I forget exactly what he says because I didn't write it down.
So yeah, he says, in Spanish he says, "Mira todas estas arañitas," which they have translated to, well, look at these little spiders.
Yeah, like it's a threatening thing, and it reveals two things about the character. One, that he speaks Spanish, and two, well, like that's a thing to know.
Because him speaking Spanish wasn't a reveal enough. They needed to say it was translated from the Spanish.
Well, I was gonna say, like, they translated it to show, like, sort of kind of how, like, he views the Spider people, or the Spider Gang.
How do you mean?
Well, it just shows a little bit of his personality. What did it say again? What is this?
Well, look at these little spiders.
Yeah. Like, it shows some of his personality.
By translate, so that we know it.
Yeah, so by what we know what he's saying, it reveals some of his personality, like, oh, okay.
I think it's more of a, like, the other Spanish used is always used in a context where everybody knows what's being said.
Mm-hmm.
In the universe, whereas this Spanish is translated at a time when there's characters in the area that wouldn't know what's being said.
I guess that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, I don't, because there's times where you don't have to translate the Spanish to get the tone of what he's saying across, and there's times where that same thing they could have translated it to help understand what the characters are saying, but when Miles was when Miles was getting ready for school and his mom was saying things to him in Spanish, translating that would have done the same thing as what you suggested of understanding of what he means.
Yeah, yes and no. With, like, Miles and his mom doing it, it's every day, it's very conversational, it's not a big deal if we understand what they're saying, and that's more setting up their relationship. Where here, it's a brand new character, like, he's sort of talking to everyone, not anyone in specific, and what he's saying is not like, do you have this, do you have that? I don't know, it's like, it's a threat. It's like, oh, what do we have here? Just these tiny things I have to squash. Like, that word choice is kind of specific.
Yeah, but I don't think it's necessary to know what he's saying to get the tone, to get the intention behind it. Because they don't translate any of his other stuff, which is just the same sort of thing, which is a similar sort of thing. But yeah, I do like they did it in the quote-unquote proper style. of translating things, where like whenever something gets translated 99% of the time, maybe not that, I made up, a lot of the time they'll just put it in the brackets with the English and then just tell you later on what it's translated from.
Yeah.
Which I like as a way to like indicate foreign tongue being spoken, of just having them speak in the brackets.
True.
And then the next thing that happens after everyone crowds into the living room, which gets very, very crowded because
it's not a big house.
Yeah, and there's almost 10 people in that living room.
Yeah.
Because I think there is 10, because there's the 3 villains, and then there's the 6 spider people.
Are you counting Penny and Spider as 1 or 2?
2.
Okay.
So 7 of them, and then Aunt May. So there's 11 people in the living room.
This room has limited capacity.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fire hazard soon.
If I think it's already a fire hazard when you look at the size of those guys.
And then I like just Aunt May being like, "Hey, could you take it outside, please?"
Move this outside.
I like to imagine them just being like, "Okay," and just everyone like filing out, like, you know, Tombstone holding open the door for Penny and Noir and Spider Pig and Spider Ham, letting them all out and being kind of nice, and then once they get into the street, then like facing off again.
Yeah, I picture something like that'd be funny. I also I like how they go with it too, with like Noir saying, "We don't choose the ballroom, we just dance," and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the fighting starts.
It's chaos.
Yeah, immediately.
So fast.
I like how Scorpion also then speaks Spanish to Miles, and he, Miles gets knocked down, and he says to Miles, "Stan Ninto Dale," which translates. It would translate to stand, because that's English. But then Ninto translates to like little boy or like baby, baby boy kind of thing. And then the Dale is sort of a go ahead, like, kind of threat, do it sort of thing. And then Miles says in his like manly man voice,
his Batman voice.
Yeah. "Preparate a morir," and he says it properly, but it translates to just "prepare to die," which is very, very dramatic coming from.
Very dramatic.
And I like how just like he kind of laughs and looks over at Tombstone like, "Get a load of this guy."
And we talked about this before we started recording, and I want to bring it up because maybe some of our listeners can help us out here, but I have memories of when seeing this in theaters that they had subtitled this part. However, in the minute we have, and when we checked on Netflix, it's not subtitled. So, am I just remembering this wrong? Am I crazy? Because even you were like, I kind of remember him getting subtitled one other time, but we couldn't find it. So I'm just shooting that out there to the audience. What do you remember? If you like, no, that definitely happened, it's just copy. Like, please help, okay?
The last thing I want to bring up before we move into the fight scene is Penny's magical transformation sequence.
Yes. Please, let's talk about it.
First of all, it takes her like a moment to act, like the fighting starts, and then she's like, "Oh, maybe I should get into Spider." And part of me feels like she understood what Miles was saying, and that really threw her off. And she's like, "What?"
I think I paused it at one point, like right before he realized his hands were stuck. Like Penny has this look of like, "Oh no" on her face behind him.
Yeah.
So she's like, "Oh."
And then once Penny realizes that, like, okay, Miles isn't going to get just absolutely destroyed right here, right now, then she jumps into Spider, and I love the little
so extra.
yeah, the magical transformation which is, common of
Any animes.
of yeah, not any of them, but yeah, many.
No,
anime.
any. I said many.
Oh, yeah.
Any anime. No, many animes. No, any anime ever, including the slice of life. There's always some sort of magical transformation and so.
Yeah, the one that springs to mind is like the Sailor Moon transformations.
Sailor Moon's a big one.
And then like for instances in Western animation when it happens, the new She-Ra cartoon on Netflix, whenever she transforms into She-Ra, she does that.
I think of Winx Club, if anyone remembers that.
Oh yeah.
Who remembers that cartoon? Where they all have like their, it's all Sailor Moon inspired, so it makes sense, but they all have their transformations into their like fighting fairy outfits. I was gonna say the one thing, like my favorite thing about the sequence, I'm telling you, Spider's faces, I'm so glad they gave him facial expressions, because at the very end he has the happy smiley face, and then battle face.
Yeah.
Which I feel the need to point out. I drew these faces in my notes, because I wanted to remember what they looked like, because they made me smile that much.
Yeah, and so as this battle goes on throughout, it was originally longer, and they had it a bit more slapsticky, so it's sort of alt scene number 13 kind of, slash mini scenes like 3, 4, 5, 6.
Alt scene 12.5.
Yeah. Where, yeah, just throughout, like, you could see where they splash in where they cut the different bits. So like the first one is when Penny does her transformation. It shows Spider changing his, like, getting into battle mode a little bit, and then also when Penny jumps in, she's like continuing her like food that she was snacking on was still in there. And then Spider, once she's in, stands up, breaks the ceiling, and then when he like pops down, there's a toilet that's like stuck on his head. And then that bit cuts to May doing the look around where it's the 4-panel shot, which I love.
So great. I
just
love how
her being like
actual destruction getting happen in the fight, and then Spider Pig smashing the plate on his head.
Yeah, he's like, I need this
shard.
Yeah, this shard. He needs something to fight with instead of using any of the other broken glass.
You know what I thought of? You know the John Mulaney bit where he's talking about a horse loose in a hospital?
Yeah.
It's like the very end of that when he's talking about the horse and the hippopotamus, and he's like, "You're crazy, I'm a hippopotamus, I live in a swamp, and I'm crazy." Like, that's what I just pictured. I'm like going through Spider-Man's hands like, "You think you're crazy?" Crashes a plate on his head.
And then once he does that, it cuts to like Miles standing across the room, like jumping up and down, waving his hands like, "Hey, throw it to me." And so Peter throws it to him, and he tries to go grab it, but then like he misses, and then Gwen grabs it, but then it gets knocked out of her hand.
Everyone!
It pretty much is just a big old
hot potato
round. Yeah. It's just like, and pretty much each time somebody grabs it or gets close to it, one of Doc's claws pops out and smacks them away. She seems to always have, 1 or 2 extra claws laying around trying to grab things.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And then so when Gwen goes to grab it and gets it knocked out, then Noir's being held up on the ceiling by one of Doc's tentacles. He's able to grab it, but then glitches and drops it. And so then Miles does a slow-mo dive across the room, like through a bunch of the fighting, reaching out to grab it, and it's just like just out of reach of him. And then one of the tentacles goes to grab it, and like they miss it. And then another tentacle goes to grab it, misses it as well. And then it like lands on the floor, and Tombstone places his foot over top of it. He puts on his brass knuckles, and then winds up to go like punch Miles. And then this is
Oh,
when it
jeez.
cuts. Yeah, and this is when it cuts to May swinging her bat and hitting him, and she says, "Take it outside."
Okay, can we appreciate May hitting and throwing Tombstone out of her house?
Oh yeah, and it's amazing that like she's able to do that, and the bat doesn't break. Like that bat, I was kind of expecting the gag of her swinging it, hitting him, and the bat just like shattering, and him turning around to like look at her. But I like how she actually does knock him out
Kick
with the
him
bat.
out. You know what? I'm gonna go with the theory that Peter reinforced that bat for her specifically to the strength to take on Tombstone.
This is her beaten bat.
She don't mess around with a beaten bat.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it like cuts back to a shot of her just like looking all like, yeah, I just kicked you out of my house. Spider Ham then grabs it and like is running along, like it gets kicked up. Spider Ham grabs it and like starts running along the ceiling, and we're watching it like from his perspective, so everybody else is like upside down. And then he gets grabbed by Doc Ock, and so he like puts it in his in his mouth, and he's like, "See, look, I swallowed it. What are you gonna do?" So she throws it against the wall, and it like pops out of his mouth. And then this is when Miles grabs it, and Prowler does his appearance.
Mm-hmm. Just when I thought this fight scene couldn't get more chaotic.
Yeah. And so it's sort of a like, okay, everybody grabs it and gets their shot at trying to hold on to it, but it gets knocked out of everyone's hands.
Or mouth, if you're Spider-Ham.
Yeah, or mouth. But yeah, it's like, I'm glad they kind of cut it down, and it's really interesting because you can clearly tell that they just like did a snip and then rearranged a couple of the parts, because like you still see Tombstone with his back knuckles like go to hit Miles, but it's never clear that like, oh, that's who he's going to hit, because then in the theatrical cut and in the final cut, that's what they do, is it's just they're like, okay, snip this part here, smash it together, and like, yeah, it still looks good enough. Like, you don't really need the continuity all that bad.
Yeah, it's chaotic enough with the fighting that like the continuity is sort of okay. Not perfect.
And they're able to like they have it cut together in such a way that like, okay, yeah, it was on this side of the room, and now it's flying back to the other side of the room, and like, that makes sense. Like, it was in that place when you end it from this bit. Even removing the cut bits, it still shows up in the right. But it's like it is a little bit off, like, oh, it wasn't that high up or that far over kind of thing. But it is kind of funny, like watching through it with the alternate bits still left in, and then going back and watching it the way it actually cut. You're like, oh, I see where they cut that and that there. Oh, okay, I see how that got cut there. It was really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like what it really comes down to is like some really clever editing to make it work, and it sounds like it also was probably kind of difficult to cut at the same time.
Not really. Like, looking at it.
Oh, really?
It seems like it was a fairly easy bit to cut in or cut out. Like, it doesn't seem that hard, or like it could easily be difficult. But they were able to, like, it seemed like they cut around it really well. And they just had to move a couple things here and there to make it flow a little bit better. But yeah, it didn't seem like it was too difficult of a thing to take out.
The last thing I want to bring up, and it kind of transitions out of this because we see Prowler show up. Which, first off, I love how the sound kind of gets overtaken by the Prowler theme.
Yeah.
But the thing I love most about this moment is Miles' cloaking ability appears again, but it's like not totally working.
Yeah, I feel like this is the first time that he was able to use it when
Like
he
on
wanted to
command?
use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't ultimately successful, like this was the
Mhm.
first time he was able to do something when he wanted to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It does feel like he's trying to do it. Like you can see the panic. He's like, I gotta get invisible. I gotta get invisible. Like, get invisible. And it kind of was working.
And then almost like he gets too scared, like
Yeah.
like he's too scared, loses focus a bit, and then it cuts out.
Yeah. But that's the last note I had. Did you have anything else to add?
There was just one other thing that I noticed in the background of the fight as it's happening, and it's that over the fireplace there is a like folded flag with some medals and stars in it, like a
Like a service.
yeah, like a
Yeah, I
service
noticed that
little
too.
display, and I don't know if that's for Uncle Ben or if it's for one of Peter's parents. In the comic, I believe we had touched on this before, but in the comic, both of his parents were like in the CIA, so they could have been like ex-military that went over into the CIA, or Uncle Ben could have had some service, probably in Vietnam. Yeah, he probably could have either in Vietnam or maybe if Uncle Ben was old enough, like Korea. They seem to be like, at least Aunt May seems to be a bit on the younger side than like Sam Raimi's Aunt May.
Yeah.
But she's still older than the MCU Aunt May. So that, like, I don't know, put her in the, she's a boomer. But, yeah, but so I kind of put them in that age range, or guesstimate if it's for Uncle Ben, but if it's like, for one of Peter's parents, then I guess, like, if I feel like Peter's parents were younger than Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Yeah. Like they were the younger sibling of whichever one. I guess it's Uncle Ben. I think it's Uncle Ben and Peter's dad are brothers, so it's the like, younger sibling, and that was that. So, but yeah, it's not clear who it's for.
It's really not. Yeah, I noticed that too, and I was kind of curious. I'm like, I wonder who that is.
Yeah, they're pretty well decorated. They have a lot of stars and medals.
Quite a few medals.
Yeah. But that was everything I had for this week.
Same here. That's all I had.
Thank you for joining us. Tune in next week when we find out how this fight ends. If you want to reach out to us, you can find us on Twitter at SpiderVerseMin, MIN. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at SpiderVerseMinute. And if you want to send us an email, you can shoot one on over to podcast@spiderverseminute.com.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.